great outdoor work. Hoardings requires a different kind of skill sets. You cannot have very long pieces of writing in it. It has to be very snappy. You are passing by in a car. So it's a 2-second kind of a thing. A very famous outdoor stuck a car on the hoarding, and it says it also sticks handles to teacups. One should read, expose oneself to as many media, as many things, not just doom scrolling on video, but cinema, audio content, books, comics, all kinds of experiences. So being very open towards the world, because while you draw from your own experiences, you cannot bring your prejudices or your narrow scopes and things. So you need to be very, very open, because for instance, you may be having a certain view, but like a lawyer or a debater, you may have to write about an opposite kind of a thing. So being able to shift sides of an argument, those kind of analytical skills will stand you in good state. I remember I was in Bombay for the first time, and so I remember this gentleman who was the head of our films division in Bombay, and Victor Banerjee is going by, and he calls in Victor, and they sit, and then next comes in Sham Benegal, and I am having this out of body experience that I am sitting in Bombay Gymkhana with Sham Benegal, Victor Banerjee, and this gentleman who was the head of films, and we are discussing cinema, and I'm just fresh out of college. Advertising shows you with different kinds of celebrities, different kind of writers, different kind of filmmakers, and different kind of experiences. So I had a whole lot of them. I was shooting with Sachin Tendulkar to Kapil Dev in those days for Boost. So yes, you're a writer, but there was a certain glamour associated with advertising.
Ashish, first thing is thank you so much. I understand you are very, very busy, but taking out time for this initiative, thank you for that.
My pleasure. It's lovely. This is something that I like to do, and I like to do a little more often since it's going out to students. And by a very strange coincidence, I'm just joined a global mentorship program conducted by just this morning by the London International Awards. So I could be paired up with some kid anywhere in the world.
Okay.
3 kids over a period of 4 months, and 1 hour each, something like that. So they share their portfolios and things, and so it's something I wish to do a little more of, but somehow have don't manage it as much as I would like to anymore. I used to do it. I used to be fond of teaching and going to my old institute, which is the Indian Institute of Mass Communications. The advertising industry also conducts something called the portfolio night for younger people who want to get into advertising.
Mhm.
And it's a global event, and that's the only one that I continue to participate in every year to help
Okay.
youngsters sharpen their portfolio to and better it and improve it to get into advertising or to rise in advertising. Yeah.
Okay. That's really great to know. Here I'm exploring writing skills specifically. So I wanted to understand what is copywriting. I'm starting off with a very basic question
Yes.
for people who do not know what is copywriting all about.
Yes, it's a fairly vast one, and in a very changing dynamics, the answer is becoming a little complex. But when we started, for instance, it was simpler with lesser media choices. But very basically put, it is using your writing skills to sell a product, service for a client in any media, be it on television, be it for radio, be it for print, be it for outdoors, be it now for digital medium, be it now for creating experiences, so to say, which is not exactly like writing, but imagine almost like staging a play for a brand on a particular day. Even that is now part of copywriting. So you walk into a place and something's happened to you, and that whole background script for that is also copywriting. So the more choices of media, a brand needs to be present in so many ways, and so therefore different kinds of writing styles. Each medium has its own, what you call, peculiarities and things. So it's copywriting has become vaster, in certain cases more specialized, but at the heart of it, it still remains that you are using your writing and imagination and thinking skills to sell a product or a service for a brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for any piece of writing that you do for a brand, for different mediums, what kind of team composition do you work with typically? And what is the role of copywriter when they are interacting with all these different team members, functional groups, if I may say?
Right. So, see, let me take you back a little for this answer, because the digital thing has really opened it up a lot more. So it'll just get a little more complex for anybody who's to coming in over there. So let me tell you a little more on the traditional side, and maybe then we can come to how the influx of digital as a medium and other kind of ways in which brands are reaching out to people changes. So traditionally, this happened somewhere in the, I guess, the 1940s or 50s in the US, that there was someone who was a copywriter, who is a person who has skills with words, and there is a person who is an art director and who's skills with visuals and layouts and typography and things. And this, of course, started out in the era of print, where print was the dominant medium, which means newspapers and magazines was the dominant medium. So it made sense. I mean, very legendary creative director who started his own agency, Bernbach. So Dave Doyle Bernbach was the agency. It's DDB. In India, it's now called DDB Mudra, that was thing. So Mr. Bernbach, one of the legends of advertising, he came up with this, that when you're designing a messaging, there is a writer and there is an art person, and then they work together. And then they work together to put out a message in a newspaper. So there is typically a headline, and then there is a visual that supports it, or sometimes there is a very beautiful visual and there's a headline just sort of captions it. So various kinds of ways. A lot of legendary advertising, print work from Volkswagen to very, very celebrated advertising came out of this combination of bringing a copywriter and an art director together. In the last 55, 60 years, till let's say the digital revolution happened, more or less this remained the core of any advertising agency. The creative department of an advertising agency remained the same. There is a writer and there is an art director, and they work, and it's a team. So you have various teams working on various brands. As you grow up, you become a creative director. A creative director is somebody who may come from either a copywriter or come from an art stream, but has enough experience to now be able to, give directions in both. So they may have these teams. So this copy and art team has been a building block of advertising traditionally for many, many years. I mean, till very recently. Now, mediums started to come on. Like, for instance, there was radio. Now, radio, there was nothing for a predominant medium in that era was print. And then after that, print and outdoor, of course, a lot of great outdoor work. Hoardings, which is what you see outside, that also it requires a different kind of skill set. For instance, you cannot have very long pieces of writing in it. It has to be very snappy. You are passing by in a car, so it's a 2-second kind of a thing. Naturally, a visual perhaps makes a little more thing, or some sort of a imagination thing. Like a very famous outdoor was they stuck for a brand of glue, Araldite, I forget the name, but they stuck a car on the hoarding, and it says it also sticks handles to teacups. Now the writer wrote that, but it's also the imagination that you can stick a car in the hoarding. So these are very legendary examples of that. So they would come together, somebody would design that. Mr. Bernbach also had a lot of with the art people also use of typography. What does each type say? If a brand wishes to be a modern thing, then what kind of typography? So art played, but I'll just stick it more to writing. Then the other dominant medium of the day was radio. Incidentally, one of my very, very favorite mediums, because there a writer, I think, is absolutely bare. He or she cannot hide behind any graphics or visual drama. It is just your word and sounds, and you have to play with that. So you have to imagine the sounds, and you have to, write to that. So that was yet another thing that a copywriter used to do, and with podcasts and all, continues to do. So that's another kind of writing. Again, a very different. Radio has been called the theater of the mind. So you're actually very different from what you're writing for, let's say, a newspaper ad, where you're actually taking an argument through. You're inviting somebody through a journey. To an outdoor, where it's a snap and boom, and you have to, make sense. To a radio, where you have to create an entire scenario in somebody's head. So that was another dominant medium. And again, a copywriter was very principal in that. Now, the thing is, internationally versus India, like, it's not that an art person could not write. Now, when the dominant language, which in India was still maybe 15 or 20 years ago, was English, usually art people would not write as much. But that was not the case, let's say, in the West, where an art person could also be a good writer. He could also come up with writers. But now in India, with all this while I've been talking about English, but in India, for instance, Hindi copywriting now, Hindi writing is very, very big. So now you can be a art person, but because a lot of brands are communicating in vernacular, in communicating in Hindi. So it's no longer on the English side of things. And therefore, again, art people can also contribute in the writing process. But to come back to it, so there was these three primary things. Then somewhere around in the 60s, late 60s, 70s, 60s, I would say, in the US, and 70s or 80s in India, television came along as a big thing. And if you see some of the television ads, early television ads, they will look like somebody wrote a slogan, because they were still writing for print, but on TV. But it was an entirely new media. It had its entirely new grammar and new things to play around with. And then another breed of another, some people were just a little better at writing, almost like a mini drama or a mini skit, than, let's say, a snappy headline, which is what a caption writing, which is, let's say, what a print journalist would do there. And very similarly, an advertising copywriter would be that these copywriters are a little better for television because they write stories a little better. Mm-hmm. So by the time 80s and in India, let's say by 90s, you had this entire kinds of writing in an advertising thing. So you had very, very fine writers of print, of very, very good headline, very classic. And English was still a dominant language in advertising in India till, I would say, late 90s, early 2000s, I would say. You had Cola as mass brands also advertising in English, if you recall the early days of TV and things like that. So you had very fine print and outdoor kind of writers, but television writing was also also coming up. If you look at the kind of courses offered today in institutes, you will see that it's not just advertising and thing. They're offering courses in radio writing. They're offering courses in television writing. So obviously, as a craft, also a lot of things have happened and developed for a writer to know. So at its basic level, it is somebody with imagination, with also a sense of logic, because you are finally advertising for a USP or for a brand or a product over there. And then you will get a hang of some medium, perhaps a little better than some people are a little better at, let's say, still a little better at print and radio. Some people are still a little better at storytelling. They will not be able to write a clean argument on a piece of paper as a headline, but they're great creators of story with minimal dialogues and things like that. So that's another kind of writing that has emerged. Till, let's say, mid 2000s, a writer and art director paired up together. In fact, still in my agency here, it's teams a lot. There are mostly a lot of teams like this, copywriter and art director. And then this late 2000s, once the digital started to come, that actually is another whole section altogether. Maybe we can structure it. We can talk about that a little later, because that is where you have where you are looking at an audience which is absolutely very, very minimal focus. You have to make sense in 5 seconds. Even at its best, a television commercial gives you 30 seconds to tell a story. Mm-hmm. Now here you have to make sense in 5 seconds, in 7 seconds, because attention spans have shrunk. Yet another kind of writing and another kind of thing is sort of emerging. And some people who are a little better at it, who are almost like technology people, but who are also writers, because and the internet is an interactive medium. So it is not that I am telling a story, taking you through a story linearly. I'm taking you through a story halfway, and then I may want you to press a button and do something and some sort of other. So that kind of thing is also emerging. So and finally, of course, today, once with a copywriter is also creating experiences.
So what I'm understanding is, with every medium, there are like the style of thinking or writing changes drastically, and you will be able to adapt what you have learned earlier, but definitely it's different, and you have to think a little differently for each medium.
Yes, you have to. And then there are obviously it's like a prose writer and a poetry writer and a poet. Somebody who's a novelist knows his tricks of the trade and knows how to sort of lengthen, shorten, extend, pause. Whereas the poetry, the whole thing is different. I'm just talking if somebody is coming in from a writing background. For instance, they're not separate mediums, but they are two separate structures. Have their own things, have their own rules, and have their own hacks. So now imagine if a thing is changing as a lyrics writer. Now you're writing a song. Obviously, everything it's a different thing. But at its heart, you have to love to write. You have to love to think, and you have to love to put ideas across.
Yeah. So, and another interesting thing that I feel based on all my conversations till now, as in, I have spoken to so many different career, like seniors in different career paths. So, most instances are where English is the primary language everywhere. And this is one industry where I feel even with your native language, you can do so much, right?
Absolutely, and that's a change. See, there was, I mean, deviating slightly, but one speaks about the colonial mindset, and if you look at our films at an earlier time, not just it's all sort of follows to reason. Now look at television. There is a reason why it was mostly English, because it was an expensive thing. It used to be there in certain kind of households, and the kind of things that were therefore advertised on TV were a certain sort of level, and therefore English continued. Now with technology booming, ghar mein, you started getting, we all, I mean, I am trained in English, I started kind of thing, but I grew up in Delhi, so thankfully my Hindi wasn't too bad either. So I could, and the television didn't ask you to be so grammatically correct. It was the language of people that one needs to be able to talk to. So as television became, ubiquitous in every place and home, the things mass brands, like it was no longer that I'm going to be, it's there in a small household, it's there in how women and housewives watching it. I need to be able to sell my detergent. Now if I'm going to talk to her in English, how will it make sense? And I have a Lalita ji. Lalita ji was created by Alec Padamsi, a very famous ad man in India, but from a very westernized sort of point of view of his recollections of how his mother used to be. So you, like a writer, I mean, many things are similar. You bring your experiences, either lived experiences or observed experiences, or you have a department, for instance, in every agency called account planning. They come up with insights. Sometimes the writer themselves can have insights, but there is a planner who will come up with insights relating to, let's say, a certain category, and we can weave that insight or that observation into our story. So it's a lot of interaction with primary sort of things of from your own life, or when you have to do many more than obviously on a sheet of paper. I said, okay, these women are actually very protective about their health of their children, or something like that. Sometimes you have to write a film or an ad to an audience about a product you have no clue on. So then obviously your own experience is not enough to know how. Some basic thing on human behavior will always be there with you, but you will need specific insights, for instance, on how a certain product is used by people in this condition, let's say. So then you need those observations and build your stories around it. So it's a very interesting, every day your job changes. One day you are discussing on how to get people, your interior decorators, to choose your brand of paint. I have no idea how interior decorators are, so I need to know how they are thinking and why our paint. To another day for a lady to choose her sanitary napkin, to another day to a child to choose a certain cycle. So it's challenges. You have to keep like,
you have to keep learning in a way, learning a lot.
Yeah. That I think is anybody who is naturally curious will do well. ये क्यों होता है? What is this? Why this? Why this? Why that? Why who's this? That little bit of curiosity, a little sense of sponge will usually do well, because your repository is like any writer. I mean, if your worldview, if what you have read or consumed or seen or experienced is large enough, you're able to bring out that many connections and that many kind of stories. But coming back to the language, which was your original sort of point, it also led to a lot of once television came in and it went into homes and different kinds of audiences, not just people watching. And once the programming went into full day as opposed to just few hours of the day, and your soaps and things and television audiences were all kinds. In India, advertising obviously changed. I mean, people were coming in from, earlier they would be coming in from cities as advertising kind of people, which led to certain stereotyping of them in Bollywood films. But now that variety is, you will rarely see. So maybe at a senior level, a few here and there, but they're coming up from small towns with a flair for writing poetry. Some have their books published at very, very young age. I used to interview people coming in for the final round for Indian Institute of Mass Communication, and the last one I did was 2011-12. I was amazed with the kind of where all they were coming from and what all they had done. progressively, year upon year, charm to get into media, their understanding of it, and their thing that I can also write like this, or I can also do stories like this, was quite a lot. So it was good to see that, and I'm sure it's now reached another level altogether. But
with the digital media, people
everybody is a filmmaker now too, not just a writer. And some kids are doing some absolutely amazing things.
So in terms of essential skills, based on what you have said so far, it's creativity, curiosity. Definitely, you have to learn a lot in terms of if you are dealing with so many different types of products and you don't know how to use, where to use, the kind of audiences, then you have to find out about them. So that kind of learning, curiosity. So what other things do you think?
If you are a writer, you have to write. Writing is essential. So you will not get past, you will not make into an entry part of a thing if you are not able to write. Usually earlier time, there used to be something called a copy test. I'll talk about that later when you get into how to get into an agency. These days you have speculative portfolios and all that. But as a writer, you have to write. That is first. So be it a poem, be it prose, stories, whatever. That's one. Second is a demonstration of imagination. When I say, again, like I see copywriting again for an agency now I'm talking about, but let's say if you're in a content place, you don't need that much of an imagination. Then you need more of a logical or a coherent flow of thoughts that you're able to structure arguments together, because that's a very different kind of writing. If you're getting into the contents, let's say in medical advertising, you have to write retailers, you have to write brochures. So there it's not that much of imagination, but a more of being able to coherently put together an argument, read matter, absorb matter, because you will be seeing it from data from different points, and being able to assimilate it simply and putting your point across. That's like a writer's task when you are doing that. So that also, and if you're in an agency, it is not that you're going to come in and write scripts. You may be given a brochure, you may be given some content on a website. So coherent, clean writing is also quite important. And the third thing that, like I said, I think one should read, expose oneself to as many media, as many things, not just doom scrolling on video, but cinema, audio content, books, comics, all kinds of experiences. So being very open towards the world, because while you draw from your own experiences, you cannot bring your prejudices or your narrow scopes and things. So you need to be very, very open, because, for instance, you may be having a certain view, but like a lawyer or a debater, you may have to write about an opposite kind of a thing. So being able to shift sides of an argument, those kind of analytical skills will stand you in good stead. Okay. And Ashish, so you said that mass communications, right? That's the kind of study, if you come from, then it will help you probably. Yeah. Is it really required? No. So anybody with good writing skills, if they are able to sell a product through their writing, they can be considered. I wouldn't even go to say they can sell a product. If they are good writers, good, what you call ideators, thinking of a concept, conceptual thinking. See, any course like a mass communication, it gives you the vocabulary of the profession. So yes, you may have a better understanding of which are the places to go, but usually some of the better people, some of the best people that I have worked with, copywriting, usually one used to say at an earlier point in time that it attracts the flotsam and the jetsam of the world. So you had chartered accountants, ex-doctors, a whole bunch of engineers. I knew one guy who was in fact a mahout. His last job, a very, very bright guy, but he was a mahout in the Kanha Forest Reserve, to somebody who is now a very, very well-known journalism, again has served a lot of people who were journalists. Very wide. Yes, you can learn writing, sure, but unlike art, where it usually helps for you to have an art or a design degree, anywhere you can come from. You can have a history, geography, political science, engineering, medical, dentistry, any background. And if you can write, if you can hold an argument on paper, write a story. One more thing I forgot. It's not absolutely mandatory. It helps if you can present it well, especially when you enter, that if you can present your idea a little dramatically or a little sort of a nice way, it will certainly an add-on value, but not totally necessary. So no background required. Yeah, no background required. If you do a mass communication or any of these advertising courses, it may help you open a few doors initially, but it doesn't assure a successful career by any stretch. any stretch. And a flair for language, be a fun person.
So entry barrier is quite low in that case. Like if you're good at writing,
if you're good at writing, yes. Entry barrier, I mean, you see, the problem, what happens is a lot of courses, they say English. It's not necessary, except in my like these global conferences or when I'm writing a case study or something. In my television things, I'm mostly writing Hindi. And since I'm a Bengali, even though from Delhi, but I can write the Bangla dialogues and things like that. And these days, with hyper localization on the rise, earlier what used to happen in advertising was that you wrote something, for instance, in Hindi, and then it would be adapted. Now for the South, just dubbed. Now you want something with Southern insights, state-wise. So you have to have something which is Kannadiga. You have to have something which is Tamil. What is the local insight there? Because you can't just dump something from the north or for the west to them. So therefore, the local writers, local things, I partner with them for one of my brands. While the brand may be the same, how it is consumed in the South and what kind of stories I would be telling in the South would be different. So I work with Tamil writers who are pretty good, and then we discuss, okay, this is what I'm thinking here, what do you think? And then they'll say, okay, ye insight kaisa hai, acha, then let's work out a story together. So like that.
Okay, so
So
that's
good scope
nice.
for language. It's a really a writer's world at this point in time, from digital to OTT to everything. I mean, content, people are really wanting good stories, any language, whatever you choose to express it in. It's no longer, it has to be a certain language.
Okay, that's great to know, because I was wondering that there are people who pursue their own native language in their graduation studies, right? So what is their career path after it? So yeah, this could be one very good option for them.
So my boss, for instance, he writes in Hindi. He has always written in Hindi. He writes his film songs. Is Mr. Prasoon Joshi. He's the chairman of the APAC region. I mean, of course, can he write English? He can write English, but his chosen thing and what he is most known for and famous for is Hindi. He, along with Mr. Piyush Pandey, let's say, of Ogilvy, and some of the people who actually pioneered the Indian move out from, let's say, the English as a lingua franca of the advertising world to mass and real thing. When television moved indoors, different kind of storytellers emerged. And I saw that. I mean, when at IIMC, at an earlier time, they would be talking about from the people who were coming from advertising, who wanted to do advertising. They had certain names, mostly from the cities, Mr. Mahmud Khan, this, that. And then slowly I saw the shift that they would come, the names that who they have followed or whose work or that it changed.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it is. A lot of good Bengali, this gentleman, I mean, he's no more, Rituparno Ghosh, he was a copywriter.
Yeah, he was into advertising before he moved into films.
Yes, he wrote some very memorable, I think his slogan, if in Bengali you would know, it is, I think, for Margot Shaban.
Okay.
And I think the line that he wrote was, Dekhte kharap, makhte bhalo, if you follow what it means.
Yeah, I do. Yes.
It looks ugly, but it feels good too. So very, very famous line in Bengali. And Bengal, in fact, has its Hata Mane Bata, legendary lines. Again, Bengali copywriters at that. So there are certain states that have always had a very active, the local people, local advertising has been always being big. Tamil, Chennai has been big. Bangalore has had a very active advertising culture in India. Bombay, of course, and Bengal, I would say.
So I also get a feel that you use a lot of freelancers. Do you?
Yes. Now, earlier it wasn't the case, but now yes, we do. Okay. Earlier, freelancers was a specialized, you needed somebody, let's say, to write something, a technical thing that, okay, this guy is good for the South, like I mentioned. Or let's say somebody is very good with automobiles or medical thing. But now what has happened is that it's actually a global phenomenon. See, advertising life is fairly intense. The writing life in an agency is very intense. And as you rise, it gets more and more. A lot of youngsters don't buy into that corporate thing. They want their own time and they want their kind of a thing. So, and this is a talent-driven industry. So if I'm not going to get the talent in-house, and if the really talented guy is sitting at home and doesn't want to, that's fine, but I need him. So for certain projects, I will get him on board. We didn't work with as many freelancers at an earlier time, but now we do.
Okay, so that has opened up as an option.
And advertising is not just the only thing, because you have got your content and OTTs opening up, and films and short format videos, and writing for your own self, becoming your own brand as an influencer.
Yeah.
So there was this writer who was working with me. Many of them, in fact, I've lost them to cinema. I have lost them to becoming a celebrity themselves. So there was this girl who was working with me in my agency when I was heading my previous agency, and she used to put out these little funny videos, and they became a hit. And then she wanted to move to Bombay, and first time I said no, but you're doing good here. Why do you want to come? And so I held her back. The next time she said no, it's a celebrity management who wants to think, and she's a very known influencer.
Okay.
Similarly, another guy who was working with me in Delhi at an earlier time, and he wrote this ad for one of our telecom brands, and they didn't buy that ad. And he moved with me to my next agency. He came with me, and then while shooting another film with a filmmaker, he said, I had this story. He said, why don't you develop that story as a film? And he had always wanted to be into feature. So he wrote that ad and expanded it into a full-fledged story. And his film got him a Filmfare, and it was one of the biggest hits 4 years back. Badhai ho.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the girl I was talking about is Mallika Dua. She was a writer there. So if I want him the kind of writing that he used to bring, which I knew he had a specific style, I'll take him on as a freelancer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, there is a lot of scope also as a freelancer. And
yes, and it helps if you have scored a little. I would not advise somebody to start out as a freelancer, because then you don't know the tropes. You can get quite limited because you will only get certain kind of very basic sort of, you will not expand your worldview. So I would always say that you should work a few years in an agency, then because what the agency does is today it opens you up to at one go all sorts of medium, all sorts of content, all sorts of things. So you are better at, let's say, something like a podcast or a radio, and you're that kind of a writer and not so much a brochure kind of a writer. But you wouldn't know if you offer your services straight away. Yeah. So
yeah.
A few years, I would say, should be, especially in an advertising agency and not an OTT, or being part of writers' rooms in an OTT, because advertising gives you an access to multiple kinds of writing and multiple kinds of avenues for you to explore. So to my mind, the initial couple of years of exploration will allow you to find where your voice is the best, and then you can go there.
Mm-hmm. So actually, if I look at career paths, there are so many different branches. You have already mentioned a few. Like
yes. I haven't. In fact, I have yet another one. For instance, now in the digital world, brands have to be always on. Like if you look at a Zomato, I mean, there's something or the other is coming out. That's also being done by a copywriter, but the copywriter doesn't reside in an agency. The creative team is actually Zomato's own creative team.
Okay.
So, and in fact, a lot of these companies like Oyo Rooms, it was my erstwhile companies, a large part of the creative department of them, they moved to Oyo Room, because Oyo Room was setting up its own creative department. Because these guys, see, if you have to be always on creative and produce creative at a churn, wherein typically in an agency, I handle 25 businesses. An agency will not be able to, usually, unless you have a digital department or something, most agencies will not be able to give you that kind of an attention to create on an everyday basis. On an everyday basis, social media, 20 posts, 30 posts, that kind of thing, thinking only around one brand, you don't. So brands which are, and typically internet brands, I would say internet or brands or digital brands, new age brands, Ola Cabs, Oyo Rooms, Zomato, these kinds. It's not like Coca-Cola that, okay, I do my one summer campaign and that's it. And then at an earlier time, they have to be there. So they create their own, what you call, ad agency, and a lot of youngsters go in there. Again, my vote to, if you want to use that as a stepping stone, and they do some very fun work, a lot of fun work. But what happens is it's very unidimensional. It's for one brand, one tonality, one voice. It's all tone. So the brand has decided, the brand is your guardrail in which you write. So you only know that sort of a guardrail and you're writing. So if you stay too long, or if you are beginning, then you only get into that thing. So which is why if you start out in an agency, or even if you are there, then move to some other place so as to for you to experience different things in your initial years. You may choose to say, okay, no, this is my real kick to create one brand and thing, but that's a choice then, not by default. So companies themselves are creating creative people themselves. Media companies, a lot of creative people, writers, end up also with, let's say, places like Meta, Google, the technology companies. And it is not just the tech writing that they are doing. They're also doing fun, creative writing, and a lot of them have agency backgrounds.
Yeah, they have, yes, because there is that corporate communication department also in these bigger companies. Yeah,
that's yet another place for creative person to usually again a writer. Though strictly speaking, in the corporate communications places, it is mostly what I have seen, Corpcom usually are the people coming in from the servicing or the account management side of agencies, because the corporate communication person in a company is not creating the work, is getting the work created through external sources. Whereas when I'm talking about an Uber, Ola, they are creating the work themselves inside. All the fun stuff that you see is not done by any agency. It's done by themselves, those guys.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and within an agency, what is your career path?
For a writer, again, you want to sort
like somebody who starts as a copywriter, and from there on, what is the career path, career growth that they can look at?
Right. So see, I mean, there are agencies love giving designations, but I'll keep it. I mean, so you form a creative director and various kinds of designations. We have like truckload names, so I'll not get into that. But usually it's a copywriter, senior copywriter, group head, associate creative director, senior creative director, endlessly. But the work role is this: your initial days as a writer, you have a role that, whatever you may call it, is that you are not responsible for your own work, which means you're a trainee, which means you have to always show your work to somebody. That's one kind of slot. Then you're responsible, the next role, whatever you may call it, copywriter, senior copywriter, but you write it and you're responsible for your work. That's whatever you call them. Then you are responsible for a group of people, not just your work, but for the work of a group of people. So then, and there may be a senior copywriter may have 3 people, or maybe a person may be called an associate creative director or a creative group head or a whatever team leader, whatever you call them. But essentially, it's not just, you're not just doing your work, and typically you will have little more brands, few more things, and a group of team of people who are not just copy, because you would have risen in the ranks to understand the importance of art in it, and that. So that's a team leader position. Then your next level, again, whatever you call it, is you're responsible for the output of a branch of an office. You may be called a creative director to chief creative officer, whatever you may be called, but you are responsible for the output of a branch.
Okay.
And then the next level is that you are responsible for the output of all the branches of the country. And if you are part of a network company, then it may not just be one agency. For instance, we have McCann the agency, we have healthcare, we have MRM, which is orange, and then you're the head of all of them. So like that. And growth, initial years, advertising is still, unfortunately, because there is very low entry barrier for writers, not art people, barriers, the initial payments are not very good. Okay, the difference between my salary and somebody who worked in GSK when I started about 30 years back would be like 2-3 हजार रुपए का फर्क होगा. Okay. Today, for somebody who enters in here, and forget about any of the, even some of your Indian companies, it would be staggering, the difference. Okay. They will be here, and a copywriter will be really at a low. From then on, it's initial few years, yeah, you're doing good. Then on, be a little more exceptional, be a little more, because there are many more kinds of writers. Unless you're able to do something a little spectacular, win a couple of awards, get to do a talked about campaign, manage something fantastically, your growth is after, let's say, 2 to 3 years. It is not an assured, clean growth like that. Okay. It is like you have to remember that you're a writer. It's like my second book has to be fabulous. Then you do well. And by the time you're doing your fifth, you've made yourself into a brand. People may say that book is not as good, but it's Umberto Eco or it's like whatever. I would pick it up. So a little consistent performance after your first, second years of finding your way around and getting a little sense. If you're able to fire like that, you will grow. And then the money becomes substantially. I mean, it is absolutely comparable to any industry.
Okay.
But it's not assured. Like if you've done your MBA from a good place and you're in a corporate thing, you slowly rise over there. Though today it's not as assured as it used to be. Even government is not as assured. You have to perform or perish or perform your performance-based meritocracy in advertising. That is very, very hard. You are not doing something good, your jumps will be not as good.
Mm-hmm. So you have to persevere. Initially, definitely.
Initially, yes. Initially, first few sort of a scenario, you don't know what it is over there. But then if you figure it out, and I've seen some youngsters too, because the avenues are also, you should not get distracted, but the avenues are also so many that yahan nahi laga to wahan lag sakta hai, wahan nahi laga to yahan ho sakta hai. It's that doggedness, but not like the nose to the grind wheel kind of a thing. I mean, there's also a certain amount of effervescence that is, I think that will stand you in good state. Okay, so one day, so because the chances also, aaj yahan pe hua nahi, okay, this time miss. Okay, never mind, you'll get another one. But you have to fire something or the other. Now, otherwise it doesn't it won't work.
Yeah, so I think this is more or less the case in any industry. You have your performance KRAs, and
correct.
have to meet
we are seeing
those,
that culture rise across, but in advertising that has been around. This kind of a sense has been around for a little longer, that I find, because I've seen corporate growths and I've seen people who have grown and jumps in advertising. You have to also understand that in advertising, you're starting as a writer, you're starting here, whereas the corporate person is probably starting here. Okay, if you're going to do little kind of a scenario, you never will catch up. But
that's true.
The requirement for you to make those jumps are really high, because otherwise you will go to your college reunions and feel miserable.
Yes. Yeah, that comparison thing with others. Yeah. Okay, so Ashish, I think we have a good overview now for people to understand what this copywriting field is all about. So if we talk about your career journey, could you tell us about that?
Well, I started off with a graduation in English from Delhi, and then I didn't even know of this thing called mass communication. And I remember me and this friend, we were going to JNU, and I wanted to pursue masters in English literature. And while coming out of the JNU campus, we were crossing IIMC, and he knew about it, and he said, "Nahi, yahan pe bhi bharna hai form." And he is today a lawyer, by the way, and he knew he knew about it, and we got in. We appeared for the exams, and so that's how I got to know about this entire thing. So in that sense, I've had a traditional entry into advertising, because I did my mass communication from IMC. But again, to say that is, in fact, after doing that 1 year there, and I remember I joined what is today, the company's name has changed, but what was then the largest advertising agency in India, called HTA, which became JWT, which became WT, and is now called VML something. It's like changed. But this is the agency that created Pepsi, Maharaja, everything. I mean, it was the largest agency at that time. I wanted to be there. And I remember this friend from my college, not IMC, and I said that, yeah, I don't think you're required to do this course. Why don't you give something that used to be called a copy test in those days, which was a very interesting thing to get in younger talent. It was a bunch of papers. You could do it at your own time, and different agencies had different models. It was like, it would have crazy questions like, launch the potato as a new product. Okay. They would have, so you will see that it tested all kinds of writing. Now it said, the Mills and Boons sells hundreds of novels every year. Write your Mills and Boons, the first 150 words of it, along with what will be its title. Okay, now writing skills. Another could be 5 cartoon strips with all the bubbles, but all the words are not there. Land a joke, write, fill it up. So if you have to fill it up to land a joke, you don't know what that thing, you could have handicap to whatever. There was, and I still remember it because it was quite an experience for me. Another one was design a board game which would be as popular as a snakes and ladders or a Ludo. So now just see what the faculties that you're testing. It's pure writing, imagination to what can be captions in kind of a thing, to launching. I mean, see, actually the only advertising task in that sense is launching the potato as a new product.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yes.
then you are stuck in a lift with 2 people. Okay. Who are those people? And the first 4 minutes of your conversation.
Okay.
Now, this is character and dialogue writing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right? I think that some agencies still do have a copy test. So there is no right or wrong. The creative director who's the head, he likes it and you're called in. And I remember I was called in by 2 creative groups because my copy test was quite good. So the only thing was what IMC helped was I knew what a copy test was. After that, I spent my first 2.5 years in HTA. It's called the University of Advertising, as in most of the famous advertising people in India would have passed through its doors at one point of time in those years. So I did 2.5 years in Delhi. It was an exciting time. I remember I was in Bombay for the first time, and those days I mean flying a plane first time. And advertising was really sort of controlled by those English old sahibs almost in that sense. So I remember this gentleman who was the head of our films division in Bombay. He says, "Come over to the Gymkhana."
Okay,
And
Bombay
I'm out
Gymkhana.
of Bombay Gymkhana, fresh out of college. I have just come to the Bombay Gymkhana, and then he says, and Victor Banerjee is going by, and he calls in Victor, and they sit, and we are sitting, and I'm imagining, and then next comes in Sham Benegal, and I am having this out of body experience that I'm sitting in Bombay Gymkhana with Sham Benegal, Victor Banerjee, and this gentleman who was the head of films, and we are discussing cinema. And I'm just fresh out of college, and I didn't what a the advertising also throws you with different kinds of celebrities, different kind of writers, different kind of filmmakers, and different kind of experiences. So I had a whole lot of them. I was shooting with Sachin Tendulkar to Kapil Dev in those days for Boost. So it was like you opened up into a very, very, yes, you're a writer, but there was a certain glamour associated with advertising, especially early 90s. I took to it like fish to water. I absolutely loved it. So coming to Bombay, traveling on shoots, and doing all those things was exciting, meeting up with different kinds of people. So then from there, I moved to, so there was this account executive gentleman who was very fond of me. He moved to another agency. Okay. And I had an interesting sort of a semi fallout, semi thing with one of my bosses, and he poached me. Now that's another thing that used to happen, that somebody moves to another agency and there's this bright somebody, let's get the person in. So then I moved to another agency, but I didn't follow a creative person. I followed somebody who was a management person, who was a very senior guy, but he took me to that, what was like a little creative, almost like a boutique agency in Delhi. It's a smaller thing. And this was the largest agency in India, from there to a very small setup. But those 9-10 months was like pretty intense because some very good creative people were working, and I worked with the creative director very closely. It's now called TBWA. That's another agency, one of the most creative agencies in the world. It was called Anthem in those days, because a lot of Indian agencies were, before the 90s, they were opened by Indian businessmen or Indian creative people, and then they sold out to foreign collaborations depending on what kind of ethos and what they stood for. So, and then a whole lot of all the international brands came in from mid 90s onwards. So I think I spent about a year in Delhi. From there, I joined an agency that I think has been where I have been spent my longest years in various installments, was McCann in Delhi. And I worked there for 4 years. I had a meteoric rise under some exceptional creative directors. I won every award in India. I had won my first award in HT, in fact, as a trainee, which was a record of sorts in a Delhi ad club, small thing. But here, when I came with McCann, there was this art person I paired with, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Sujit Dasi, and I came together in that small boutique agency, Anthem, TBWA. But we came in and we were like a house on fire, and we had a fabulous time. We won their own internal awards, and then we joined this agency, and I had Another very important thing to say that if you join an agency or join a company or join a person whose work you admire in your initial years, if you can work with them, because they really shape your outlook, and he or she also happens to be a good person, and mine was an exceptional person to promote us and everything, whereas a lot of times in a world where people take credit, he really pushed us out there. I remember there used to be something called an CAG Awards in Bombay in those days, and we were in Delhi, and that was like the cream de la cream of awards, and we had picked it up, two young boys from Delhi, and he said, you guys go up on the stage. And suddenly you heard your names in pictures. So if you, and whose work you admire, if you work with them, you will get the right kind of work ethics or the right kind of craft and those kind of a sense. And on top of that, if the person happens to be a good guy, that's good luck for you, but not necessarily. A lot of fabulously talented people may not be the best of the guys, but still I would say go with them because
you learn a lot from them.
You will learn a lot from them. If he or she happens to be a good person, well, good luck. So that was those 4 years, and I became, I think, one of the youngest creative directors at that point of time in Delhi, and I thought I'm like the cat's whiskers, and I had just about 6 or 7 years of experience. Yeah. And I did a very, very silly thing. I moved to Bangalore along with my team to head an agency.
Okay.
That was too early. That was absolutely, and I had no idea that when you're working with a large agency, there are so many people looking out for you. When you're doing good work, a whole lot of things, you can be really iconoclastic, brash, a lot of things, a lot of allowances were made. But when you move to the setup where you have clients and suddenly you're the single person, a lot of responsibilities expected out of you. So I moved to this agency in Bangalore, which was a creative agency, so to say, but I was me and this guy, we were the heads. And I didn't know what hit me because I was suddenly sitting in finance meetings. Because as a creative head, like I said, you are responsible for your work, you're responsible for the work of a few people. And then suddenly from here, we took that thing and it was big monies was thrown to us and we were like really taken in. And I can't tell you how initial first year was a real, again, so that's the learning for me is that don't pick it up before your time. It may be
money-wise, it's lucrative, but yeah, it will be.
If you're having a good time, if you're doing good work, if you're thinking my number of, and I remember the first, second year, we were winning everything to my awards dwindled like anything because I was doing regular. I was just didn't know what to do. I was trying desperately to claw back to Delhi or Bombay, and it wasn't happening. Then he and I decided, Sujit and I said that we will have to, yahi karm bhumi hai, let's make something out of this. And we slogged and slogged. I mean, that was the first year. I think in that agency, I don't think they have ever made the number of films that we made. We could sell our clients that time. And we had our first nomination at Cannes, which is the biggest advertising festival. And this was 2001. We were very few Indians would go at that time. So that somehow got us noticed and everything. And that agency decided to place us. And there's also a global pitch for a brand that we were actually heading in McCann. But we were never too sort of, oh, it's so dull and boring and all that. We would, not that sort of a thing. And it was that very brand that allowed us to get back to Delhi because there was a global pitch and this boutique worldwide agency won that pitch. And that brand was to be based out of Delhi. And we got back to Delhi after 3 years to head Delhi.
Okay.
I became, he and I were the head of this agency in Delhi, Euro RSCG, which is now called Havas. We spent a couple of years there. And then there is another little learning that came along the way, is that this ex-boss of mine, legendary man in those days, he had joined another agency and he said, come, we will do the same magic again. And all of us who were part of that original gang, and we all said that we don't want to do this all management stuff. Will it be like that? And he said, yeah, it will be like that. It wasn't like that. Because
you have risen already.
Yeah, the expectations were to do a lot of managing and yet you were not the final authority. And the realization is that just because a certain group of people came together at a certain point of time in a certain place, something happened, it is not necessarily that the same group of people in another place will create the same magic again. Sometimes it happens, but it's not necessary. While I was there at Euro RSCG, one of the most legendary art heads of India called Mr. Ravi Deshpande, who had set up this creative agency called Contract, which is one of the first creative agencies in India. It was a subsidiary of HTA, JWT's sister agency, creative agency. The gentleman, very, very famous creative man who started it. And when they asked that why did he start Contract, and his answer was that because HTA wants to foray into advertising. Because all that was done by HTA was apparently all crap. So Contract. So Mr. Ravi Deshpande, he got me to head Contract Delhi. So then the next 2.5 years, I worked in Contract Delhi. And then what happened was that I had this few brush-ins with Mr. Prasoon Joshi over several years. We have been meaning to work together. We have been talking this, that. And then one day he called me and he said, would you want to head Delhi, which was McCann, in that sense, a return of sorts. And by then he had become like, Rang De Basanti had happened. And he was, struggling from both advertising as well as cinema. And McCann had vast different brands. And for us, it was almost like a return because we had gone from the same place. So then the next 6 to 7 years, I was there in McCann Delhi as their head of creative. Moment I moved in there, I had already been head of agency for, from Euro almost 6 years. I started to get offers to head agencies nationally. But because of that early experience of taking on something that I was not ready for, I resisted it. So there was an offer that I had to head another agency, which was also large nationally, or to work as the Delhi head of this thing. I chose this one. Over the next 5 to 6 years, we had a spectacular time. We won massive number of businesses, massive number of awards. We had a great equation going along. I worked there for about 6 years in McCann Delhi, and then Contract came back to my life. And by the time I thought that I was ready to head something nationally. So then Contract got me back to head it nationally now, all the branches and all the verticals of Contract. Initially all the branches and then all the verticals like design and other sort of. I had a beautiful 6-year run then in Contract, hiring in different kinds of people, getting in businesses, getting Contract. Contract was a very creative agency that had fallen onto after the departure of Ravi Deshpande had sort of gone down. I had 6 years of an experience of getting an agency back up on, and like we were really getting talked about. If you look up on the net with the things with Contract with my name, you'll just see that. And I remember there was this chat with somebody, yeah, decide kar lo na, ek hi baar mein sare news de do. Every bloody third day you guys are on the news on doing something or the other. So some really great people, great friends, great what you call clients. I had another 6 years. And then 5 years back, of course, Prasoon Joshi by the time had become more than India. Then the thing was not just that you're India heads, you're becoming head of Indians are becoming global heads and APAC and regional and sort of bigger names over there. So Contract got a little bit of a thing with a lot of change in management at the JWT, which was always a sister concern, and there was a certain thing. And so Prasoon called me back to head India for McCann with all the verticals and the entire sort of thing thrown in. So then 5 years ago, I on January 2019, I joined back McCann, and I have been here since. We've got a great run so far. So that has been my journey. So from Delhi boy, absolutely starstruck early days in Bombay to now I'm mostly in Bombay, but of course Delhi is our largest office, and Bangalore or wherever one needs to be. And along the way, over the years, what was happening is that Indian advertising was also starting to get recognition globally. So not just Indian awards, we won a lot of international awards, be it in Contract or be it here in McCann, and got recognized. I was been jury at various international, what you call advertising conclaves, from the US to Europe, Cannes, Clio, the works. We've won a whole lot of awards over the years, a lot of recognition. So that has been my advertising journey.
So Ashish, based on what you have told me so far, so I feel you were creative right from your schooling days, I believe. Was it always there in you, or how was it?
Yeah, I think it's like line I used to like quite a bit is all evil is potential vitality in search of a direction. Okay, so it's the naughty, it's people who were like shaitans and all those kind of traits got channelized once I got into advertising. And it's such a fun thing. I mean, you're thinking of, you actually, initial days, these are things that one did in the back of school books. Mm-hmm. If school copies, you make things, make sort of fun and all those things. And here you were getting paid for it and being respected for it, and you're being, being celebrated or being feted for being outrageous or being dramatic or being holding a fun conversation. So those, it just, at once upon a time, one used to say that advertising is the most fun you can have with your pants on. Those are like famous old quips. And more so for a writer, I would say most so advertising is most so fun for a creative person. And I think writers have a little more fun, but my art colleagues may disagree. They may say the art directors have a little more fun, but creative people have a lot of joy in this. It's a profession of joy. It is pretty intense. It's a lot of strife, but there is joy in it. If you continue to derive that, if you like, let's see, अब क्या crack करना, बता इसको, क्या बोल रहा है client. Let's kind of figure it out. क्या है? How is this? So if you enjoy that, if you enjoy the different challenges every couple of hours, you will like it.
So you have loads of responsibilities is something that I can easily see. And along with that, how do you manage all these different engagements? Like I requested you, I understand we took time to connect, but then still you have been doing this earlier also, as you mentioned. So how do you accommodate?
I like it. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it. You find time for things you like. Mm-hmm. Figure out. It may take a little while, this, that, but you throw yourself. And these days, you have also inspirational people doing 15 things now. Like I'm doing, okay, maybe 8. Mm-hmm. So there is always, bigger heroes and heroines running around who are doing even more. So I think I like it. That's
why you are able to.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yes, I mean, it's when a particular thing comes, a client is saying, okay, this is the issue over there. Yes, you do get bogged down, you do get sleepless kind of nights. But at the same time, also what happens, I've realized, is a meeting happened and something good, and suddenly I don't know what it is I will be doing in the next. I have half a day free. I actually don't have anything to do. So then I don't know what to do in some cases. But I like to do a lot of things. I'm wired that way. If I'm in a flight, I'm reading a book. I'm on the Goodreads. Initially, I thought I read a lot. Then I realized that, okay, no, I don't actually read that much. Then I got onto the Good Readership Challenge, reading challenge. And now I do about 15 to 17 books a year in both languages. So, yeah. So
that's like 30 books.
No, 15 to 17 a year. Is in some years I managed to do. Like last year, I think I did 17, but the year before that, lockdown year was good. 20 to 23 books I read that year. Fiction, mostly, some fiction, some non-fiction, and literary books. So that's what I read. I used to, of course, I've watched a lot of cinema in my earlier days, but now the OTT kind of thing, I actually don't watch it unless something gets, because you're part of culture and you borrow from culture and you are sometimes contributing to culture. So if something gets talked about a lot, then I see it as a task. Okay, I have to see this now. Like everyone was saying, Mirzapur, acha wo Mirzapur ka wo character, Mirzapur ka ye character, usko cast karo. I don't know what is this Mirzapur. So ek Saturday, Sunday बैठ के I saw सारे मैंने episode देख डाले. Or let's say Queen's Gambit के बारे में someone's talking about. I remember I just finished Breaking Bad, I think last month.
Okay.
Because finally I got down to say, okay, I have to see this because, this is, it's been gone, or Game of Thrones or whatever. I mean, one gets talked about. So for me, like that, my passion a little more is more reading than watching. And like I said, that I do it because I enjoy doing many things. Mm-hmm. So that's why.
There are people who want to have some free time to themselves. Are you more like somebody who wants to be busy with lots of work?
No, that would be not true. I do would want some free time, but I do miss it sometimes, but not all the time. Yes, it you need a little bit of time to yourself to recharge. You need a little bit of time to focus. So without that, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But equally, if your work is enjoyable, it becomes play. So all that is there. There are parts of your work that, managing meetings, kind of a scenario, which feel like work. Those days you do get really tired and you do wish like that, yaar, ye part nahi agar hota to. But like I said, that, when I went back to that, my best years, my most, or rather not best years, my most enjoyable years was when I had no responsibility, because we were so good at our work. Everybody gave us all the freedom to do only what I chose. But then I realized that time is over. And when I went back to the same group, I realized that I can't have that anymore. I have grown and the world has changed. And yeah, that was a fabulous rockstar life which we led for 4 years. No responsibility.
Just your own work.
Yes, just your own sort of a thing, but it can't come back.
Mm-hmm.
So then some parts of this, it's not that you don't like. I mean, then, like I said, that some of these things about like teaching, taking a bunch of youngsters, keeping oneself, it's a young profession. When you work with a younger lot of people, there you feed off their energy, you
Yes.
contribute. They have some stories, they have, so even if you're feeling a little tired, you spend a little time and then you are recharged. वो कुछ और एंगल से लेके आते हैं, वो then you look up like that. If you keep it enjoyable, you won't feel tired. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. So one last thing I was talking about was about experience with team management. Anything that you want to highlight from your experiences so far?
So I have been, I think, splendidly lucky to have, barring maybe one exception or two exceptions, maybe one or two exceptions, of bosses who were like really very good, whose work I admired in some cases, or as people, they were like really worth looking up to. So I think it is important for anybody to start out when you're part of a team, that the person who you report to or the person you super report to, there should be somebody over there who's creatively, whose work you admire, you like, or you think that they bring value to you. Because otherwise, if you're only reporting to somebody who is just a manager and you're in a creative profession, you won't pick up much and learn. So that's, I think, is important. And because I have learned from, and or my bosses have been, creative bosses have been very, very good with me, I try and do the same. So my group has been, even when I was running the smallest group, creative leader always stands out. And there are certain things we picked up, that okay, so creative leader is actually the first. It's not that anybody can come in and mess around with your team. You're the leader and you have to face it, and you have to kind of protect them and all that. So I have tried to do that in my various capacities, whereas I was running a small team, or whether I was running a branch in different kind of agencies, or whether you run nationally. And the thing of this is that you have done a job, because when these people stay friends or stay connected with you for almost for life, like with that boss that I told you, for me, I mean, every month, once or twice, we will still talk, because you bond beyond because a creative profession is when you are discussing everything, you feel very naked, you're very vulnerable when you are exposing yourself as a writing, and then other person's response to it and how they are reacting to it. So you bond very well, if that is beautiful, if that chemistry works very well, and then that's like a friend for life. That's like a mentor, a friend, or somebody you will talk up, sir kaise hain, for life. I have tried to do that with my youngsters in various forms, in various agencies and things. And so people I've worked with for 20 years back or 15, kind of a scenario, one shout, one kind of call. It's like that. When that guy said I was heading a branch, and he said come, and then we went. So like that. So then leader will always will not just teach, will also bring out your best, bring out your potential. It is not just, okay, I'm doing this for you kind of a thing, but will also look at your skills, will help to polish your craft, take it up, give you opportunities, protect your vulnerability, not make you feel small, because all of us have our own strengths, and all of us have our own good days and bad days. So it's like a soldier thing. You are giving your vote to another person. So if that person looks after you well, great creative leaders create great creative environments. At the end of the day, some places under some leaders prosper, because the role of a creative leader is to create a creative environment within the team, within the office, within an organization. Is that where if everybody's fearful, for instance, then you don't, then you say, kya sochega, kya bolega, मैं छुपा के बोलूंगा, तो वो अच्छा environment नहीं है for creativity to prosper. You have to be little, so fearlessness is, I think, important. You have to be smart, but you should be able to, in your one-on-one creative interactions, you should be able to say, this is what I'm thinking. So I have tried to do that, and in my view, respected creative people always have this bunch of followers, because those people have given them that kind of a protectionate thing, where you're not only looking up to their craft, but also you are being groomed or protected or pushed up by them. It doesn't mean it's only a lovey-dovey thing. Somebody can be really harsh and hard at you, but that doesn't mean that
it's not protective of
it's
you.
not protective of you. Yeah, it can be like, really, in fact, what they say, that you're harder on the ones that you like. So it's like that.
Okay. Yeah. So Ashish, we'll wind up for today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. It's it was good fun talking through some of the older type things, especially. The only thing that I'll just sort of say is that, communication is a wider field than advertising and ad agencies.
Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of this insightful conversation with Ashish Chakravarty. In this episode, we explored what it takes to enter and navigate the advertising world, the evolving role of copywriters across different mediums, and the importance of creativity, curiosity, and adaptability. Ashish also shared valuable insights on how aspiring professionals can carve their own path in this dynamic industry. But there's more. In the next episode, we dive into the impact of AI on advertising, how it is changing the industry, what it means for freshers, and why understanding AI tools can give aspiring creatives an edge. Stay tuned for this crucial discussion. We are committed to helping students make informed career choices by bringing them direct insights from industry leaders. To continue and grow this initiative, we need your support. If you would like to contribute or sponsor this effort, please reach out us at info.learnerme@gmail.com. Every bit of support helps us keep this valuable content accessible to students. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share it, especially with students who can benefit from these conversations. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep learning and crafting your career.